January 30th, 1944. Southeast of Palau Island, Philippine Sea, 0200 hours. Lieutenant Commander Slade Cutter stands in the conning tower of USS Seahorse 180 feet beneath the Pacific. For 80 straight hours he has been stalking the same Japanese convoy. 3 freighters, 7 escort destroyers. Minutes ago, Cutter fired 3 torpedoes into one target. The stern of the ship detonated and tore away. The freighter reared up, went vertical, and vanished into the black water. 450 Japanese troops screamed as they slid into darkness. Then, everything changed. Every destroyer in the convoy turned toward Seahorse's position. 7 warships, each carrying 72 depth charges. 504 explosions waiting to happen. Cutter has 8 torpedoes left. His batteries are down to 40%. His crew hasn't slept in 3 days. The destroyers are charging at 35 knots. Seahorse's maximum submerged speed is 9. The math is brutal. He is about to die. 93% of submarines attacked by multiple destroyers in coordinated patterns do not survive. Cutter has no room to maneuver. Below him, Palau's coral reefs sit 400 feet down. Above him, the surface is 180 feet away. And closing from every direction are 7 destroyers, their screws churning, their sonar locking on. He is trapped inside a 3-dimensional kill box with walls made of high explosive. Standard doctrine says go deep, go quiet, and pray the destroyers pass overhead. Slade Cutter does the opposite. He turns Seahorse directly toward the lead destroyer and orders flank speed. Lieutenant Commander Slade "Devil" Cutter is about to do something that will redefine Pacific submarine warfare. Over the next 48 hours, he will sink 2 more ships from the same convoy while being hunted continuously. He will survive 127 individual depth charge detonations. He will surface at night to recharge his batteries while Japanese destroyers search for him just 3 miles away. He will turn the hunters into the hunted. And none of this should have happened. Because 3 years earlier, nobody in the U.S. Navy wanted Slade Cutter commanding anything. Slade DeVille Cutter was born on November 1, 1911, in Oswego, Illinois, a farming town where men were measured by how much alfalfa they could harvest, not by how many enemy ships they could sink. His father had been permanently injured playing football, so Cutter's mother steered him away from contact sports entirely. Instead, Slade learned the flute. Not casually, completely. By 16, Cutter won a national flute competition judged by John Philip Sousa himself, the man who wrote the Marine Corps March. When Cutter arrived at the U.S. Naval Academy in 1931, he listed his vices on his entrance paperwork as tobacco, swearing, and flute. But 6'2" and 215 pounds of Illinois farm muscle doesn't stay invisible for long. The football coach noticed him immediately. His name was Paul Brown. Yes, that Paul Brown, the man who would later have the Cleveland Browns named after him. Brown watched Cutter cross the yard and said one sentence, "You're playing football." Cutter said he'd never played. Brown said, "You start Monday." By 1934, Cutter was an All-American tackle, playing both offense and defense back when men never left the field. On December 1, 1934, at Franklin Field in Philadelphia, 79,000 people watched the Army-Navy game dissolve into chaos. Rain turned the field into ankle-deep mud. Navy hadn't beaten Army in 13 years. Fourth quarter, score 0-0. Navy drove to Army's 20-yard line. Head coach Tommy Hamilton called for a field goal. Everyone knew it wouldn't work. The field was a swamp. The conditions were impossible. Cutter, normally a lineman, stepped back to kick. The holder placed the ball. It immediately sank 3 inches into the mud. Cutter kicked it anyway. The ball wobbled through the air like a dying duck. It had no business flying straight. It barely cleared the crossbar. The referee raised his arms. Good. Navy 3, Army 0. Final score. 79,000 people exploded. Slade Cutter became a national celebrity overnight. Professional boxing promoters offered him contracts that would set him up for life. He turned them all down and reported to the battleship USS Idaho. Because while Cutter was kicking game winners, war was coming. In May 1938, Cutter entered submarine school at Groton, Connecticut. He had never been on a submarine. Most of his classmates washed out. The pressure of being sealed inside a steel tube hundreds of feet underwater broke them. Cutter graduated top of his class, not because he was fearless, but because he understood something the others didn't. Football had taught him that pressure is just another opponent. December 18, 1941, 11 days after Pearl Harbor. Lieutenant Slade Cutter was executive officer of USS Pompano, serving under Commander Lew Parks, one of the most aggressive submarine captains in the Pacific. They were headed towards the Marshall Islands on America's first submarine war patrol. 200 miles from Pearl Harbor, a U.S. patrol plane spotted them, mistook them for Japanese, and called in dive bombers from USS Enterprise. 3 near-miss bomb strikes ruptured Pompano's fuel tanks. Oil streamed behind them for 40 miles, a perfect arrow pointing to their position. Parks ordered them to continue anyway. They confirmed the Japanese occupation of Wake Island, then pushed deeper into enemy waters. Near Waji Atoll, they found a 16,000-ton Japanese transport. Parks attacked at 1,200 yards, close enough if the torpedoes detonated early, the blast would kill everyone on board Pompano. All 4 torpedoes hit. The transport rolled over and sank in 4 minutes. Then a Japanese destroyer appeared. Parks ordered a down-the-throat attack, the most dangerous submarine maneuver. You point your bow directly at a charging destroyer and fire at point-blank range. Miss and you're rammed, malfunction, and the torpedoes circle back and kill you. The first 2 torpedoes detonated early, 50 feet from Pompano's bow. The concussion knocked men off their feet. Parks fired 2 more. Both missed. The destroyer dropped 36 depth charges, 1 unseated an engine exhaust valve. The engine room flooded. Pompano plunged toward the bottom at 400 feet. Cutter coordinated damage control. The blue ballast surfaced and escaped, barely. Cutter returned to Pearl Harbor, having learned the most important lesson of his life. Perfect aggression is safer than cautious hesitation. October 1943, Cutter was assigned as executive officer of USS Seahorse, a brand-new Balao-class submarine under Commander Don McGregor. On their first patrol, McGregor made 2 attacks, let multiple convoys pass untouched, got depth-charged, ruptured his fuel lines, and limped home. Admiral Charles Lockwood reviewed the patrol report and removed McGregor for insufficient aggression. October 20, 1943. Slade Cutter, age 32, assumed command of USS Seahorse.
3 Japanese trawlers off the coast of Japan. Standard doctrine says submerge and torpedo them. Trawlers aren't worth surfacing for. Cutter surfaces anyway. He brings Seahorse up into open water, swings the bow toward the nearest ship, and opens fire with the 5-inch deck gun. 14 minutes later, all 3 trawlers are sinking, no torpedoes spent. His crew thinks he's insane. They are 200 miles from the Japanese mainland, exposed on the surface, vulnerable to aircraft. Cutter looks at the wreckage and says, "We save the torpedoes for bigger targets." November 1st, 1943, night. Seahorse encounters a 17-ship Japanese convoy, cargo vessels, troop transports, oilers, escorted by 6 destroyers. The convoy is zigzagging at 12 knots. Cutter plots an intercept course, submerges to periscope depth, and does something no submarine commander has ever attempted. He steers Seahorse directly between 2 destroyer escorts and slips into the convoy formation. Now he is inside the protective screen. Enemy warships surround him on all sides. 400 yards ahead is a 7,000-ton passenger cargo ship. Cutter fires 9 torpedoes in 90 seconds. 2 slam into Yamadori Maru. She snaps in half and sinks in 3 minutes. 3 more strike Chihaya Maru, a transport carrying 900 Japanese soldiers. The explosion ignites her fuel tanks. The ship becomes a floating funeral pyre. Destroyers converge. Cutter goes deep. Over the next 2 hours, 72 depth charges detonate around Seahorse. Not one makes contact. When Cutter surfaces later that night, 200 yards away, his crew asks how he stayed so calm. Cutter answers, "I played football in front of 79,000 people. This is just 7 destroyers." When Seahorse returns to Pearl Harbor on December 12, 1943, Cutter has sunk 9 enemy ships totaling 48,000 tons in 53 days. Admiral Charles Lockwood studies the patrol report and says, "Can you find Japanese ships in Pearl Harbor if I need you to?" Cutter doesn't smile. "Sir," he says, "just point me where you want them dead." January 6, 1944. Seahorse departs Pearl Harbor on her 3rd war patrol. Destination: the Palau Islands, 550 miles east of the Philippines. Intelligence reports major Japanese convoy activity. Tokyo is desperate to reinforce its island garrisons before the Americans invade. Cutter gives his crew 4 objectives: sink supply ships, sink troop transports, sink tankers, sink anything that moves. By January 21st, Seahorse has already destroyed 2 freighters near Truk. Then Ultra Intelligence delivers a gift, a large convoy departing Palau, heading north with reinforcements for the Marianas. High value, heavy escort. Cutter positions Seahorse 30 miles southeast of Palau and waits. January 28th, 1400 hours, periscope depth. Cutter sees them. 3 freighters exiting Palau Harbor, surrounded by 5 escort destroyers and 2 submarine chasers. The convoy is zigzagging at 14 knots in a defensive formation designed specifically to defeat submarines. Freighters in the center, escorts forming a moving perimeter 2,000 yards out, zigzagging every 8 minutes. Standard doctrine says wait for nightfall, surface attack. Cutter doesn't wait. He tracks the convoy for 32 straight hours, staying submerged, running at battery-draining speed, watching for an opening that never comes. His crew is exhausted. His batteries drop to 35%. Power is bleeding away faster than he can recharge it. The chief engineer finally says, "Skipper, we need to surface and charge batteries or we're dead." Cutter answers, "We surface when they're dead." Hour 32. January 30th, 0200 hours. The convoy changes course slightly. One escort destroyer moves 200 yards out of position to investigate a radar contact, probably a whale. For 90 seconds, there's a gap. That's all Cutter needs. He orders flank speed, closes to 1,400 yards, lines up the largest freighter, Toku Maru, 2,700 tons, carrying 450 Japanese troops, and fires 3 torpedoes. All 3 hit. The first tears Toku Maru's stern completely off. The second detonates in the engine room. The third strikes midships and ignites her fuel bunkers. She sinks bow first in 90 seconds, dragging 450 men into the Pacific. And now, the real problem begins. Every destroyer in the convoy heard the torpedoes launch. Every watchstander saw Toku Maru explode. They know exactly where Seahorse is. Cutter orders emergent deep. Seahorse plunges to 400 feet, stopping just above the coral reef floor. 7 destroyers converge and form a circle 3,000 yards across. They begin dropping depth charges in a coordinated pattern designed to herd submarines to the center, where overlapping explosions crush the hull. The first charge detonates 200 feet above Seahorse. The concussion slams men into bulkheads. Light bulbs shatter. The gyro compass spins wildly. Cutter orders silent running. All non-essential systems shut down. No one speaks. No one moves. Seahorse drifts at 2 knots, barely controllable. The second depth charge explodes 150 feet away. The hull groans. Cork insulation rains from the ceiling. A hydraulic line ruptures, spraying oil across the control room. Cutter realizes what's happening. The destroyers aren't dropping randomly. They're listening with sonar, adjusting, tightening the pattern. They're pushing Seahorse toward the center, so Cutter does the opposite of what they expect. He orders flank speed toward the nearest destroyer. The crew thinks he's lost his mind. You don't charge the ship dropping depth charges on you, but Cutter knows something they don't. Destroyers can't drop depth charges directly beneath themselves. The safest place during a depth charge attack is under the attacker. Seahorse accelerates to 9 knots, closing at 45-degree angle. Sonar tracks the destroyer's propeller noise. 800 yards, 600, 400. The destroyer hears Seahorse's cavitation and turns to ram. Cutter orders emergent deep, 500 feet beyond Seahorse's rated crush depth, and passes directly beneath the destroyer with just 200 feet of separation. The destroyer drops 6 depth charges. All 6 detonate 300 feet above Seahorse.
Cutter's gamble works, but it leaves him trapped deeper than ever. 500 feet down beyond Seahorse's rated crush depth, 6 destroyers still closing in, batteries at 18%, no room to surface, no speed to run, no silence left to hide behind. So he makes the most unnatural decision of all and orders all stop. Neutral buoyancy, 0 propeller rotation, turning Seahorse into a 2,400-ton steel statue hanging motionless in the dark, while for 40 endless minutes no one moves and no one speaks as sonar pings ripple through the hull like a metronome of death. Until 6 hours into the attack, the destroyers finally make their mistake, assume the submarine has been crushed, and drift away to rejoin the convoy. After which, Cutter waits another 20 minutes before surfacing in full daylight at 0800, just 50 miles from a Japanese airbase with enemy destroyers still within radar range, an act that borders on suicide, but is unavoidable because with batteries down to 11%, Seahorse will become a steel coffin if he doesn't charge, diesel engines roaring as lookouts sweep the sky, and 45 minutes later, radar reacquires the same convoy, still moving north 30 miles away, prompting the executive officer to suggest breaking contact and heading home, only to be cut off by Cutter's calm reply, "We're not done."
and for the next 48 hours he shadows the convoy relentlessly, surfacing at night to recharge, submerging at dawn, letting destroyers double back and drop random depth charges while he stays just outside their reach, until February 1st, 1944 at 0300 hours, when the convoy enters the shallow waters of the Luzon Strait, where maneuvering room disappears. Cutter fires 8 torpedoes at the remaining freighters and misses, draws another ferocious counterattack, then fires his last 2 stern torpedoes while diving deep, both striking home as Toriu Maru erupts in a gasoline-fueled explosion visible from miles, while the damaged second ship limps away, followed by 55 more depth charges dropped over 4 hours that Seahorse somehow survives, finally breaking contact after 80 hours of pursuit with batteries at 9%, torpedoes exhausted, 127 depth charges endured, 3 ships destroyed from a single convoy, and more than 1,000 enemy troops never reaching shore, limping back to Pearl Harbor on February 16th, where Admiral Lockwood asks how he's still alive, and Cutter simply shrugs and says they kept missing, earning his second Navy Cross and a reputation so powerful submariners from other boats lined the pier to see him, one later explaining that Cutter treats depth charges like football penalties, just noise. Advice Cutter distills into a 6-minute briefing: get close, shoot straight, don't run until you have to. Tactics that work brilliantly but prove fatal for those without his nerve. Before his 4th patrol off Guam in April 1944, where he immediately attacks a massive convoy, detonates the ammunition-laden Aratama Maru with a blast that cripples nearby ships, returns hours later to sink Mimasaka Maru, later torpedoes Japanese submarine I-174 in one of the rare submarine-on-submarine kills of the war, and finishes the patrol by sinking Akiyama Maru, earning a 3rd Navy Cross while accomplishing something more important than tonnage totals, because every ship he destroyed meant fewer Japanese soldiers, less fuel, and less ammunition waiting for American Marines. So when U.S. forces landed on Saipan in June 1944 and Japanese commanders reported crippling shortages, it was not only the result of what happened on the beaches, but of what Slade Cutter had already done far below the surface of the sea. Those shortages were not accidental, but were directly caused by submarines like Seahorse. And on June 15, 1944, Cutter's impact reached far beyond torpedoes when he was patrolling the Philippine Sea and spotted smoke on the horizon, closed to investigate, and identified the largest Japanese naval force he had ever seen. 6 aircraft carriers, 4 battleships, 5 heavy cruisers, and dozens of destroyers. Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's main battle fleet moving to stop the American invasion of Saipan. Far too heavily escorted to attack, but Cutter immediately sent a contact report to Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the U.S. Fifth Fleet, a message that allowed Spruance to redirect his carriers and intercept Ozawa, resulting in the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the Marianas Turkey Shoot, where American aviators destroyed over 330 Japanese aircraft and sank 3 carriers, breaking Japanese naval aviation forever. And although Cutter's role became a footnote in history books, without his report, Spruance would not have known where Ozawa was, and the battle might never have happened as it did. On July 19, 1944, Seahorse completed her 5th patrol, and in just 4 patrols under Cutter's command, she had sunk 19 Japanese ships, totaling over 100,000 tons, the 2nd highest total of any submarine commander in the Pacific, behind only Richard O'Kane and tied with Dudley Mush Morton, earning Cutter his 4th Navy Cross, 1 for each patrol, a feat achieved by only 5 American submariners during the entire war. after which he was reassigned to Portsmouth Naval Shipyard to command the brand-new submarine USS Requeen, sponsored at commissioning by his wife Fran on April 28, 1945, with Requeen arriving at Pearl Harbor on July 30, 1945, ready for combat just 14 days before Japan surrendered, meaning Slade Cutter never fired another torpedo in anger, later commanding the heavy cruiser USS Northampton and serving as athletic director of the Naval Academy from 1958 to 1962, where he was often better known for football than submarines, retiring in 1965 as a captain after refusing to play politics that might have earned him a star, living quietly in Annapolis until June 9, 2005, when he died of heart failure at 93 after years with Parkinson's disease, buried at the U.S. Naval Academy Cemetery beneath a headstone listing only his rank, service dates, and 4 words, 4 Navy Crosses, with no mention of 19 ships, no 80-hour chase, no 127 depth charges, because some things do not fit on stone. And there are 2 ways to tell his story: the legend of a fearless superhuman commander who charged into impossible situations and turned hunters into hunted, and the documented record of a disciplined tactician who calculated risk precisely, trained relentlessly, and understood that aggressive action executed correctly was statistically safer than hesitation, a man who was not fearless but deliberate. Both versions true, both remarkable. And what matters most is that Slade Cutter understood the most dangerous moment in any battle is not when the enemy charges you, but when you hesitate to charge them. Because waiting lets convoys escape and troops reach the battlefield. So Cutter never waited. He created opportunities, charged into escort screens, surfaced in daylight to charge batteries, tracked convoys for 80 hours, turned toward destroyers instead of away from them, not out of recklessness, but because he had done the math and knew aggressive precision beat cautious delay. A lesson he first learned kicking a field goal through ankle-deep mud in front of 79,000 people who believed it was impossible, and one he carried into submarine warfare, where the fields were larger, the stakes higher, and the rule the same: play to win.